Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Dome Hearing Room. It's great to see you here this evening. I almost knocked over my beer. It's great to see you here this evening, everybody. Let's get into it. Aria is not impressed, Daywalker. She is not impressed. Marco Rubio, I think we're in front of the Senate. Are we in front of the Senate? We're about to find out. Follow me into the Dome Theater.
Go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
We got some hubbub. We're definitely going to do the hubbub. Marco Rubio coming through the crowd. Look at him. Oh, my God. Coming through the crowd. Shaking hands on his way in. Look at all those people. Where's the hubbub? 1 second. Is this muted? Is this muted? Turn on the mic. Man, look at all those cameras. Do people still use actual cameras? Why aren't they taking pictures off their cell phones? Seriously, where's the audio? It's freaking me out.
President Biden or by most of the international community.
Okay, blah, 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 blah. Let's go to Marco's opening statements.
Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. We're now going to hear from Secretary Rubio. After that, we'll do a round of 5-minute questions. And
so when I did work in politics, the guy who was Marco Rubio's chief of staff, he was in charge. He left Marco Rubio's chief of staff, and then he became like a campaign manager. And I worked for that guy when I was working on a congressional campaign out here in Florida. Very fun guy. I miss him. Ballyhope.
So with that, Secretary Rubio, welcome back to the committee. Love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll be brief in my opening statement so we can leave more time for questions. I've submitted a written statement, but I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to talk to you guys for a few minutes. And
all right, here we go. Suspend. You know the drill. Off to jail.
That's a war crime.
That's a 1-year ban from the committee. Anyone who is a persistent violator will be banned for 3 years. So don't know whether the guy falls in that category. Looks like it. I hope after 3 years he'll find a more productive means of employment. Secretary Rubio, we have 2 hearings a week. You know, you seem to have a more robust following than most of our witnesses that come before us. But anyway.
There'll be a couple more, so thank you for stopping the clock, but I appreciate it. So, and I know there's a lot of other topics you're going to ask me about, so we can talk about those, including the ones that Senator Shaheen just outlined. But let me just talk about Venezuela in particular.
Please.
I think we can talk, if you want. I'm sure your questions will be about what happened before and led up to in the operation. I want to focus my comments this morning on what happens now and moving forward, because you're going to ask about the going back. And let me just say this. What is our goal going in? We had in our hemisphere a regime operated by an indicted narco-trafficker that became a base of operation for virtually every competitor, adversary, and enemy in the world. It was, for Iran, their primary spot of operation in the Western Hemisphere was Venezuela. For Russia, their primary base of operation in the Western Hemisphere, along Cuba and Nicaragua, was Venezuela. In the case of China, China was receiving oil at a huge, about $20 a barrel discount. And they weren't even paying money for it. It was being used to pay down debt that they were owed. This is the oil of the people of Venezuela, and it was being given to the Chinese as barter at a 20%, at a $20 discount per barrel in some cases. And so you had basically 3 of our primary opponents in the world operating from our hemisphere from that spot. It was also a place where you had a narco-trafficking regime.
Are you guys looking at what I'm looking at? Holy shit, this guy's ears are huge. Like, we got to do something about this haircut, Marco Rubio. Let's get like a little Beatles shag going on or something, huh?
That openly cooperated
we can work with
the FARC and the ELN and other drug trafficking organizations using their national territory.
Good Lord.
It was an enormous strategic risk for the United States, not halfway around the world, not in another continent, but in the hemisphere in which we all live. And it was having dramatic impacts on us, but also on Colombia and on the Caribbean basin and all sorts of other places. It was an untenable situation, and it had to be addressed. And it was addressed. And now the question becomes what happens moving forward. As I've described to you in previous settings and in individual conversations, we had 3 objectives here. The final, I'll work it backwards, because the end state here is we want to reach a phase of transition where we are left with a friendly, stable, prosperous Venezuela, and democratic, in which all elements of society are represented, and free and fair elections. By the way, you can have elections. You can have elections all day. But if the opposition has no access to the media, if opposition candidates are routinely dismissed and unable to be on the ballot because the government, those aren't free and fair elections. That's the end state that we want: free, fair, prosperous, and friendly Venezuela. We're not going to get there in 3 weeks. It's going to take some time. And so objective number 1 was stability. In the aftermath of the removal of Maduro, the concern was what happens in Venezuela. Is there civil war? Do the different factions start going at each other? Are 1 million people crossing the border into Colombia? All of that has been avoided. And one of the primary ways that it has been avoided is the ability to establish direct, honest, respectful, but very direct and honest conversations with the people who today control the elements of that nation. Meaning the law enforcement, the government apparatus, et cetera.
He heard everything,
and one of the tools that's available to us is the fact that we have sanctions on oil.
Those are like radar screens on the side of his head.
That cannot move from Venezuela because of our quarantine. And so what we did is we entered into an arrangement with them. And the arrangement is this: on the oil that is sanctioned and quarantined, we will allow you to move it to market. We will allow you to move it to market at market prices, not at the discount China was getting. In return, the funds from that will be deposited into an account that we will have oversight over. And you will spend that money for the benefit of the Venezuelan people. Why was that important? Venezuela was running out of storage capacity. Okay? They were producing oil, they were drilling oil, they had nowhere to put it. They had nowhere to move it, and they were facing a fiscal crunch. They needed money in the immediacy to fund the police officer, the sanitation workers, the daily operations of government. I love that,
Day Walker.
And so we've been able to create a short-term mechanism. This is not going to be the permanent mechanism, but this is a short-term mechanism in which the needs of the Venezuelan people can be met through a process that we've created, where they will submit every month a budget of this is what we need funded. We will provide for them at the front end what that money cannot be used for. And they've been very cooperative in this regard. In fact, they have pledged to use a substantial amount of those funds to purchase medicine and equipment directly from the United States. As in fact, one of the things they need is dilutin, depending how you want to pronounce it. And that basically is the light crude that you need to mix with their heavy crude in order for the oil to be able to be mixed and moved.
I was going to say
They used to get 100% of that from Russia. They are now getting 100% of that from the United States. So we're using that short-term mechanism both to stabilize the country, but also to make sure that the oil proceeds that are currently being generated through the licenses we'll now begin to issue on the sanctioned oil goes to the benefit of the Venezuelan people, not to fund the system that existed in the past. The second is a period of recovery. And that is the phase in which you want to see a normalized oil industry. Again, look, we've got plenty of oil. There's plenty of oil all over the world. Canada produces heavy crude, so it's not like Venezuela's oil is unique in that regard.
Let's take Canada!
Despite the fact they have the largest.
I could totally get behind war with Canada. I mean, I'm already there. Let's do it.
Known reserves in the world. It's not irreplaceable. But we understand that that is the lifeline. Their natural resources are going to allow Venezuela to be stable and prosperous moving forward. And so we have created what we hope to do is transition to a mechanism that allows that to be sold in a normal way, a normal oil industry, not one dominated by cronies, not one dominated by graft and corruption. To that end, the authorities there deserve some credit. They have passed a new hydrocarbon law that basically eradicates many of the Chavez-era restrictions on private investment in the oil industry. It probably doesn't go far enough to attract sufficient investment, but it's a big step from where they were 3 weeks ago. So that's a major change. We can address some of the other components, but I'll run out of time. But one of the parts of the transition phase, or the recovery phase, is beginning to create space for different voices inside of Venezuelan politics to have an ability to speak out. Part of that is the release of political prisoners. By some estimates, up to 2,000. They are releasing them. They are releasing them probably slower than I would like them to, but they are releasing them. And in fact, you're starting to see some of the people being released beginning to speak out and participate in political life in the country. We have a long ways to go. Look, we can talk in more detail about all of these things. Suffice it to say, I'm not here to claim to you this is going to be easy or simple. I am saying that in 3.5, almost 4 weeks, we are much further along on this project than we thought we would be, given the complexities of it going into it. And I recognize that it won't be easy. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we are dealing with people over there that have spent most of their lives living in a gangster paradise. So it's not going to be like from one day to the next, we're going to have this thing turn around overnight. But I think we're making good and decent progress. It is the best plan, and we are certainly better off today in Venezuela than we were 4 weeks ago. And I think and hope and
I hope he explains how this is America first.
expect that we'll be better off in 3 months, and 6 months, and 9 months than we would have been had Maduro.
I think he kind of did. China was in there, blah blah blah. Iran was in there, blah blah blah. Okay, I get it. We don't want China or Iran in our southern southern hemisphere. Okay, all right, fine. All right, what's next?
Still been there. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right, let's see. Let's take a real quick look on who's on this diocese and see if we recognize anybody. We don't spend a lot of time inside the Senate with the dome. Ooh, this is the dude that gave his daughter to Biden. He's a senator from Connecticut. We might want to check out that guy. Who else we got here? Guy with glasses. Oh, we've seen him at every single freaking Trump rally he's ever did. Who is that? Mitchum? I don't freaking remember anymore. That guy looks crazy. That guy's always fun. He doesn't know. Oh, Rand Paul. We should definitely check out Rand Paul. We don't spend any time in the Senate. Rick Scott, I mean, I'm from Florida, but I don't like listening to that reptilian. Yeah. Booker, is that Booker? We should definitely listen to Booker. Collins, is that Collins? Whoever that guy is from Texas that Ken Paxton's about to beat. This chick we should definitely listen to. She gets crazy. Mike, yeah, we should listen to Mike. Okay. Is anyone taking notes on who I want to listen to? Okay, we're just going to go.
Secretary Rubio, we'll now do a round of questions, 5 minutes each. I'd like to start, and I'd ask you to go. I understand we're not in a classified setting, but I think a lot of people had no understanding of the groundwork that was done before the actual action took place. I was incredibly impressed with what you told me about how you, the president, negotiated with parties there on the ground, particularly the parties who were.
Let's start with this Republican, and then we'll go to the guy from Connecticut
after Maduro was removed. And I wonder if you could talk about that for a minute, understanding that we aren't in a classified setting. And I'd like to, if you could, say a few things about it.
Well, one of the things I've come to maybe more fully appreciate than I didn't when I was here in the Senate was the number of contingencies that the Department of War plans for all over the world. The overwhelming vast majority of them will never come to fruition. But there's all kinds of contingencies that are planned for. And one contingency that had to be planned for is the fact that sitting in Venezuela with a $50 million reward on his head was an indicted narco-trafficker. In fact, I believe it's the largest reward we've ever issued for anybody. I would remind everybody the Biden administration had a $25 million reward on an indicted narco-trafficker, the same person. And so, multiple administrations from both parties have wanted this man arrested. And one of the options the president had before him was the opportunity, if things didn't work out, to go in and remove this individual because he was wanted in a law enforcement operation. Now, obviously, a law enforcement operation against the de facto head of a regime is not as simple as going after some fugitive hiding in a closet somewhere. It required planning, and
like
it required
that kid in Miami.
Eliminating anything that was a threat to the forces that were going in to extract him. I want to be clear, and I'll share with you what I've shared publicly. We made multiple attempts to get Maduro
What was the name of that kid? Elian Gonzalez?
Voluntarily, and to avoid
Wow,
all of
what a
this.
throwback joke, Mr.
Because we
Rotella.
understood that he was an impediment to progress. You couldn't make a deal with this guy. Okay, this guy has made multiple deals. He's broken every one of them. As a point of example, he made a deal with the Biden administration, and here was the deal that he made. It was a bad deal. We knew he wouldn't keep it. He made the following deal. Pardon my nephews, his nephews, who were convicted narco-traffickers.
The good old Biden.
Convicted
Biden
already and
pardon.
serving time in jail. Pardon them. Pardon and release Alex Saab, who was his money man, his bag man, primarily in charge of the portfolio with Iran, released these people. He, in turn, agreed to release some political prisoners, which he did. Many of them were subsequently exiled or rearrested, and that he would hold free and fair elections, which he did not. In fact, he basically disqualified Maria Corina Machado and any other candidate, and Edmundo Gonzalez ends up being the nominee for the opposition party simply because they forgot to ban him, and they forgot to put him on the ban list. And then despite that, he loses an election that everyone around the world recognizes as a legitimate election. So he's made previous deals. In fact, he's broken so many deals, not even the Vatican has been willing to interact with Maduro in the past because he's broken.
Well, listen, the 2020 election was obviously rigged and stolen too, but no one came to our fucking rescue, Marco.
So many of these deals.
Where was the
He's just
world
simply
to
not a
help
guy
us?
you can make a deal with. He had no intent of keeping it. What he wanted to
We
do
should become
was tap us along
isolationist.
and buy 3 years of time until he could deal with a new administration that he thought may be more favorable, et cetera. He was an impediment to progress. None of the things we're talking about now, not the release of political prisoners, not the transition of the oil industry to a legitimate oil industry, not the erosion of Iranian, Russian, or Chinese influence. None of these things would have been possible as long as Maduro was there. And so this was one option that was available to the president after exhausting every other option to remove this individual from the scene. Again, I'm not here to tell you these are all going to be roses along the way and it's all going to go perfectly. But for the first time in 20 years, we are having serious counter-narcotic talks with Venezuelan authorities about going after narcotics organizations. For the first time in 20 years, we are having serious conversations about eroding and eliminating the Iranian presence, the Chinese influence, the Russian presence as well. In fact, I would tell you that there are many elements there in Venezuela that welcome a return to establishing relations to the United States on multiple fronts. We are at the end talking about a Western country that has a long history of cooperation and work with the United States. At one time, Venezuela, pre-Chavez, was a very strong U.S. ally. And we hope to get back to that point. We're not there. This thing still is in its infancy. But I certainly think a lot of progress has been made in that regard.
I was impressed with your description of the fact how careful you were in the operation not to dismantle either institutions or infrastructure because you wanted to see the Venezuelan people take that over and get back on their feet again. I think that was really a wise decision to make and have it as surgical.
I've always been told that, Daywalker Stripes. Thank you.
The last thing I'd ask about, if you could touch on for just a minute, is I know you spent a considerable period of time negotiating with the people that were going to do day-to-day operations, the Venezuelans who were going to fill the vacuum. How's that going, and how do you feel about where we are there?
Well, first of all, let me understand something. I spent 14 years in the U.S. Senate going after these people pretty hard, along with many of you. So, I mean, I understand who they are, and I understand this portfolio from a personal level quite well. So we are very realistic about what we're dealing with here. We also understand that in geopolitics...
I believe Marco Rubio, the only person on the Trump cabinet that got 100% of the vote from... No one voted against this guy to be confirmed.
Times that's required. And in this particular case, there are an alignment of interests. And we certainly think that the approach we're taking is preferable to some of the other alternatives that people speculate about or fear. And I would say at this point, I do have to characterize, again, being realistic, clear-eyed, and understanding that there will be impediments and unexpected events along the way. What we have found so far is cooperation, respect, dialogue, and it's not just me. As has been reported in the media, Director Ratcliffe traveled to Caracas and met with leaders there and discussed important items of potential cooperation. I've also discussed, and I think I've alerted some of you, that we have Laura Dogue, who was our ambassador to Nicaragua in the past and to Honduras, will be taking over the Venezuelan Affairs Unit, first in Bogota, but ultimately in Caracas. We've had a team on the ground already there. We already had 70 locally employed that sort of maintain that facility, but we have a team on the ground there assessing it, and we think very quickly we'll be able to open a U.S. diplomatic presence on the ground, which will allow us to have real-time information and interact, by the way, not just with officials in the regime and with the interim authorities, but also interact with members of civil society, the opposition. We think we're going to be much further along when we get them along the way. They've been very cooperative on that front. Obviously, there's some hard asks along the way. We'll see what the response is to those. But whether it's General Kane with his counterpart, or Director Ratcliffe, or myself with Delcy Rodriguez, We've established what I think so far has been a very respectful and productive line of communication as we go through this stabilization phase and towards the recovery phase. But there's a lot of work to be done here. And, we ultimately are going to judge actions, not words. And that's what we're hoping to work towards.
Well done, Senator Shaheen.
I do love watching these kind of things, Dome, because it kind of feels like we're on the ground floor of everything that goes on in the United States and around the world whenever we watch congressional hearings and stuff like this. It's kind of like we're in like a board meeting. We're not going to watch this chick. We only got like an hour and something left of the stream, so we're going to fast forward to people that we know. We're going to go to the dude from Connecticut whose daughter is the famous gif of Joe Biden going in to kiss somebody and the girl like looking up and moving away. That's this guy's daughter.
Question is, what are we doing here? What is the point? What is the goal?
Oh, let's rewind. Who is this? Kuhn? I think his name's Kuhn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Ricketts. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio. Good to be with you again. My basic question is, what are we doing here? What is the point? What is the goal of this hearing?
How do I know?
As you know well, having served on this dais alongside me for 14 years, this is an oversight hearing. And the purpose of oversight
He
is
sacrificed
to
his daughter.
encourage, if necessary, to compel consultation between the administration and Congress. And I just wanted to raise with you at the outset, of course the Commander-in-Chief has, under Article 2, the power to defend the American people against an imminent threat or an incoming attack. How else could we be kept safe?
What's
But
that
our
other flag
Article
on
1
him?
power requires consultation. I'll agree with all of my colleagues. Nicolas Maduro is a bad guy. He was indicted. There was a bounty on his head over several administrations. His removal, flawlessly executed by American troops, thankfully none of them hurt, did cost the lives of 75 to 100 Venezuelans and Cubans, was a dangerous and high-risk maneuver. I am glad.
No, that's not the one. Sharon, there she is. There she is at the end. Did it start with that? It didn't start with that.
Go to the lobby.
We missed her. We missed her moving away.
Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It is two flags. I'm wondering what the second flag on the right is. It looks just like a red flag. And oh my God, you're shitting me. Is that the Greenland flag? These people are such fucking pussies. They will put any flag next to the American flag, no matter what the hell is going on that we're talking about.
Glad that it ended as well as it possibly could.
I think
But the
it's
point
the
here
Greenland flag.
that I want to make first
Oh my
is
God,
that it
what
was
a
rehearsed for
moron.
months. The administration had a number of contingencies it was trying to navigate through. But over the course of months, when the administration was taking strike after strike after strike against drug trafficking boats, in several instances where senior leaders of the administration briefed this committee and others,
That's what I was just
we were
saying,
told
Vice.
that military action to remove Maduro was not on the table, that the campaign to try and deter drug trafficking was not going to include the exact military action that followed. Yet it was being rehearsed. If there was time to practice, there was time to consult. And consulting with Congress is not just some high-minded principle, not some abstract thing, not a nice to have. It's a got to have. And look, the chairman
would've
opened
leaked
by
it.
saying that this was limited in scope and duration, that it was executed flawlessly, and we should all be happy about the result. That much I agree with. But our president continues to threaten Delcy Rodriguez and the remnant of the Maduro regime with military force if they don't comply. We should know what are the policies, what is the path, what is the plan forward. You and I both know the long and painful history of wars that began and seemed to be resolved and then opened up into excruciating, expensive, years-long conflicts.
What's up, Zep?
In Iraq
Welcome
in
in. Valley
particular,
Hill.
in Libya and elsewhere, things do not
bet
always
this guy
go as
voted for
planned.
all of those
and so
things.
consultation with Congress that is truthful and forthcoming
Do we
and
know Zep?
transparent is critical.
Welcome in, Zep. Possibly first time ever inside the dome. Everybody say ballyho to Zep, unless we met them during a riot watch where we get a little busy, and I apologize if I don't remember.
In your service in this body, you knew that, you experienced it. I was in the room as you held to account members of previous administrations for not coming forward as they should have. So, look, in order to avoid our men and women in our armed forces going into harm's way, doubting whether they have the support of the Congress, consultation, hearings, and deliberations are required. I understand the risk of leaks. That's a risk.
Where do you possibly even find an American flag connected to a Greenland flag pin like that? There's no way. Like they had to order out for that, right? That's not at the gift shop.
Every administration takes. But at the
You want
end
us
of the
to put
day,
what
our
flags
framers
together?
entrusted the power of the declaration of war to this body, not to the executive. And where there is the time to consult, there has to be consultation. Second, I just wanted to talk about allies and alliances. I was just in Europe. I led a bipartisan delegation, as Senator Shaheen referenced, to Denmark. And our president's comments about NATO, about Denmark, and his attempts to
It's
coerce
Denmark. Who gives
Denmark
a shit?
into giving up Greenland are appalling.
You know
they
what? I want
profoundly
Denmark
harmed
now,
our
too.
security. And I am asking you to do everything you can to reinforce our commitment to
How many people
NATO.
live in Denmark?
I was concerned that you just said NATO needs to be reimagined. Let's
Yeah.
just be clear about the record.
By destroying
You know
it.
as well as I, Article 5 has only been invoked once, and it was in defense of us after we were attacked. Danes and soldiers from almost every other NATO ally deployed and served, fought, and died. 52 days. And for me, the most emotional moment of my visit to Denmark was laying a wreath at the memorial to the Danes who served.
Imagine saying my most emotional part of my trip to Denmark. Bro, it's Denmark.
Served, fought, and died alongside Americans. So when our president
Oh
says
my
we never asked for
God.
anything from NATO,
So
and
stupid.
they never gave us anything, and you suggest that they aren't carrying their weight, whether it's in bases, or in access, or in troops,
I
or in
cried
service,
in Denmark.
it is allies that will keep us safe in the Indo-Pacific. Our treaty allies, Korea and Japan and Australia and the Philippines, are going to be critical to Indo-Pacific security against our principal threat, China. And in Europe, I'm worried that the very foundations of trust are being shaken. Our democracy depends
so
on
is your
consultation with Congress that is truthful and timely, and the confidence of our allies depends on them knowing where we're going next. Today, an armada is steaming towards Iran. Our president is on social media threatening Iran, and I hope I can count on you, Mr. Secretary, to consult with us and inform us before our next actions, whether against Nigeria, Colombia, Cuba, Iran, or anywhere else. And I hope
What
and
about
believe that I
Denmark?
can count on you to reinforce the sanctity of NATO, not to reimagine it.
Denmark's population is 6,017,017. It's happening, my friends. Isn't that as many people that live in like a suburb of Chicago?
To reinforce
I think we can take Denmark.
Thank you. Well, let me unpack the 3 points you touched upon: consultation, NATO, Greenland, alliances in Greenland. Let me tell you on the consultation. Look, this has been a point of tension, not just in this administration and Congress, but in multiple administrations. As you rightly pointed out, I was a big fan of consultation when I was sitting over there. Now, you know, it's a different job, different time. But it's not. That's not necessarily the point. This is a very unique situation that we faced here. The fact of the
What's
matter
up,
is that
Habs?
our
Ely
mission, and
Domer.
the one you were briefed on and talked about, that mission remains ongoing, and that is the counter-narcotic mission that we continue to carry out. As controversial as it may be, you may not all be fans of it, obviously, but it is happening in the Eastern Pacific, and it is also happening in the Caribbean Basin. The problem is, or the good news is, there aren't a lot of drug boats moving in the Caribbean Basin anymore, and that's what we had briefed Congress upon. This specific mission that you've talked about, one of the reasons why you rehearse it is to see if it's even feasible, to basically go to the president and say, is this something that's even an option on the table? The truth of the matter is that this mission could not have been briefed to Congress because it wasn't even in the realm of possible until very late in December, when all of our efforts to negotiate with Maduro had failed, and the president was finally presented these options and made these decisions. It was also a trigger-based operation. It may never have happened. It required a number of factors to all align at the right place at the right time in a very limited window, and it wasn't even clear if it was ever going to be possible. There's also the aspect which I do not control, and that is deference to the Department of War on operational security. Despite the fact that we had kept this quite constrained, the truth of the matter is that this was leaked. We now know it was leaked by a contractor at the Department of War that, had it been published, would have endangered the lives of people and/or would have probably canceled the ability to carry out the mission. So this is a real tension, and one that I'm doing the best I can to try to manage within the constraints of two things: operational security and also decisions being made. There are multiple contingencies for events all over the world, including
Marco
some that none of us think we're ever going to come to fruition.
Mr. Rubio is great at this.
In this particular case, one of the reasons why you rehearse these things in advance is to know whether it's even possible. Is this even doable? And what are the risks associated with doing? So you can present options to the president, who ultimately makes these decisions. In the case of reimagining NATO, it most certainly has to be reimagined. And the reason why it has to be reimagined is not because its purpose is reimagined. Its capabilities have to be reimagined. Let me give you as a point of example. There's a lot of talk about security guarantees. And it's something that there's general agreement about now with the case of Ukraine. But those security guarantees basically involve the deployment of a handful of European troops, primarily French in the UK, and then a U.S. backstop. But in fact, the security guarantee is the U.S. backstop. It is not and I'm not diminishing
And I don't want
the
to be a
fact that
backstop.
some countries in Europe are willing to place troops in a post-war Ukraine. What I'm pointing out is
because you know what happens? You know what's going to happen if America is the backstop of Ukraine? Zelensky's going to throw a fucking wild pitch right away, and then it's going to be up to us. Screw that. Screw Ukraine. How many times did we hear in the campaign, no more money to Ukraine, no more wars, no new wars? Fuck, man, I don't care if there's a peace deal with Ukraine. Just get America out of fucking everything.
Is irrelevant without the U.S. backstop. And the reason why you need such a strong U.S. backstop is because our allies and our partners have not invested enough in their own defense capabilities over the last 20 or 30 years. Now, hopefully that's going to change. Hopefully that is changing. And in some cases and in some particular countries, it's already changed. But this is a fact that we cannot ignore. NATO is going to be stronger if our allies are more capable, especially, and here's the reality, whether we want to accept it or not, we have interests all over the world. We have interests in the Middle East, we have interests in the Western Hemisphere, and we most certainly have interests in the Indo-Pacific. A number of you have already pointed out that China is the chief challenge. We can't have the same soldiers or the same ships in both Europe and in the Indo-Pacific. We have to pick. No matter how many ships we build, no matter how many capabilities we grow, we're going to have to make these adjustments.
I hear we used to grow. I hear we used to build a ship a day. Jeff Mack with the raid, everybody. Give it up for Jeff Mack. Let's go say hi to some hooligans and we'll get back to Marco Rubio. Jeff Mack inside the raid. Ballyho Jeff Mack. Thank you, my friend. Always great. Always a great raid from Mr. Mack. It truly is. You know why I like a raid from Mr. Mack? Because the next day, Mr. Mack isn't inside the Twitter device going, "Oh, Mr. Rotella, did you like that raid that I gave you? How'd you like that raid, Mr. Rotella? Did you like it?" Ballyho Jeff Mack. There he is, ladies and gentlemen, the Jeff Mack. The Jeff Mack. If you're not following the Jeff Mack, follow the Jeff Mack. Ballyho Jeff Mack. Jeff Mack usually goes live before we go live, so make sure to hang out with Jeff Mack and the hooligans. Happy freedom, everybody. We're going to be watching the Marco Rubio hearing. I'm going to be fast forwarding and things depending on what we feel like watching, honestly. So thank you, Mr. Mack, for the raid. Welcome in, hooligans. Happy freedom. Let's go back to Marco Rubio.
Go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm totally going to text. I'm totally going to tweet Jeff Mack tomorrow. I love the raid, Jeff Mack. All right,
and the
let's go.
stronger our partners are in NATO, the more flexibility the
Welcome in,
United
Appeal
States
Ahead
will
of
have
Ins-
to secure our interests in different parts of the
Elder
world.
Zoomer,
That's not an
too old
abandonment
to
in
care.
NATO.
Welcome in, everybody.
That is a reality of the 21st century and the world that's changing now. In the case of Greenland, I'll say we're in a good place right now. We had excellent meetings with the Secretary General of NATO. In fact, even as I speak to you
Here
now,
we
there'll
go,
be some
says
technical
Vice.
level meetings between us and our partners in Greenland and Denmark on this issue. And I think we have in place a process that's going to bring us to a good outcome for everybody. The president's interest on Greenland has been clear. It's a national security interest. It's a long-standing interest that predate this administration.
Draco,
it's one that our
that's a
allies
great
acknowledge
name.
is real. I think we're going to get something positive done. We're going to begin that process
That sounds
in a
like
very
my alter
professional,
ego.
straightforward way. It begins today, and it'll be a regular process. We're going to try to do it in a way that isn't like a media circus every time these conversations happen, because we think that creates more flexibility on both sides to arrive at a positive outcome. And I think we're going to get there. And I thought it was noteworthy and important that despite your concerns, the president
Happy
at his
Freedom
speech in
Wench.
Davos made very clear that the United States was not going to use force or military force.
I love the
in
Davos
Greenland.
speech.
So I think we're going to wind up in a good place. We got a little bit of work to do, but I think we're going to wind up in a good place. And I think you'll hear the same from our colleagues in Europe very shortly.
Mr. Senator.
You know what? I not only want Greenland, now I want Denmark. Just because Kuhn he almost cried his eyes out when he made that trip to Denmark.
The Gang of Eight has never leaked.
Senator,
It is critical that you consult with Congress.
A
For
little
us to be
while in a
safe, our
bottle.
allies have to trust us. And for this committee to do our work, we have to trust you.
All right,
Let's
Kuhn.
work together
Thanks,
to restore
Kuhn.
thank you,
that.
Senator Kuhn. Senator McCormick.
Mr. Secretary, thank you.
McCormick? You know what? We will stay with McCormick. We watch McCormick. You guys want to stay with McCormick? We might run a little long tonight. I don't think that there's any post-dome, so we might run a little long tonight. I'm okay with watching a little bit of this.
For being here, defending American interests in the face of Russian, Iranian, and Chinese encroachment in the Western Hemisphere is a key to the Trump corollary of the Monroe Doctrine. But Venezuela's new interim leader, in her public commentary at least, defends their ties to Russia, Iran, and the PRC, and had said this week had enough of U.S. interference. So beyond the oil leverage, which you talked about in your testimony, what steps is the administration taking to demand from the interim government to put incentives in place to ensure that they prevent malign actors, foreign terror organizations, and so forth from continuing to have influence and safe haven in Venezuela?
Yeah, it's I mean, yes, there's leverage, and I wouldn't just say oil. I think anything that's sanctioned in Venezuela, will, in order for them to normalize it, will require cooperation with the United States. But it's not just leverage, it's also their national interest. It's an alignment of their interest. The truth of the matter is that the United States will be a far better partner for a future Venezuelan government that's free and democratic, and even for the current authorities, than some of the...
Everyone give a ballyhoo to Hair Juicer, first time inside the chat. What does that name even mean? Hair Juicer? Would you mind explaining your name to the chat? Can you please come forward and explain your name to the chat?
partners they've signed up with now. Frankly, we think it's
What
not
the hell
in
is that?
Venezuela's interest to have an Iranian presence or the sale of Iranian weaponry or anything like that into their country. So I think there's alignment there. We think and can argue that some of these criminal elements, which they've allowed to act with impunity in parts of their country, is a deal with the devil. In the short term, it provided revenues to some corrupt regime officials, but in the long term has created real destabilization, not for just them, by the way, but also for Colombia.
Caller
Just
says,
understand something. The FARC dissidents and the ELN...
Mr. Rotella looks like Dale Earnhardt.
Operate with impunity from Venezuelan
That's my
territory.
Dale
They
Earnhardt
control
impression.
Venezuelan territory.
Yeah.
And some of that was through deals with individuals aligned with the regime because they made money off of that. But we don't think that's in the long-term interest.
Do they agree?
And what's been expressed to us by
Ballyhoo
leaders of the
James,
interim
welcome
authorities
in.
is that they agree. And now we're going to test
Despite
it.
the public commentary, there's a recognition, you think, and progress.
Look, we all have politics.
Yeah.
Even in places like that. Suffice it to say what I've said from the very beginning, and that is we are going to judge based on actions, not words. And that's going both ways. You can tell us you're going to do all these great things. If you don't do them, you didn't do them. Or you can say, I'm not going to do these great things, but if you do them, you did them.
Good.
And I think we can point to some things now that show you, just as an example. Think about it. Within 2.5 weeks of Maduro's removal, They passed reforms to the hydrocarbon laws, which basically
I mean,
roll
the
back
dude
many
totally
of the
looks
Chavez
like an
era
elf, right?
restrictions on private ownership and investment
This
in their
haircut
country.
does not do him any favors.
It doesn't
on
go
the
far enough.
front
It probably needs to do more.
shot.
But that's extraordinary. That never would have happened to
Marco, bro, we gotta go with the shaved sides, man. When a little hair covers the front, the dude looks like an elf. Like, are we watching Lord of the Rings? Lord of the Senate Rings? A hair juicer says 15 years ago. Any story that starts like that, I'm down for. All right, hair juicer. Hair juicer says 15 years ago, I made a PlayStation account, hit random letters, and chose the first suggestion. That sounds like a late night infomercial product, so I added 3,000. Hair juicer 3,000. All right, we will accept that answer. Ding, we will accept
2 or
it.
3 weeks ago. It certainly wouldn't have happened if Maduro was still there. So I think these are signs of progress.
15 years ago.
Do they still have political prisoners? They do. But many are increasingly being released every single day, and some are actually being released and beginning to speak out again. And we're going to watch very closely how they're treated and how that happens, because that'll be part of how we judge them and their actions.
You
not
touched
words.
on my second question, which is this long history of very sordid history for outside investors coming into Venezuela. And the president and you had a meeting with our energy leaders.
Did they start 15
in the
years
Oval
ago?
Office to talk about the opportunity to invest? And there was, worries about the safety of investing. What steps beyond what you just described in terms of the hydrocarbon law, security guarantees for workers, any sorts of a certainty that investors are gaining, which is going to allow them to have the confidence to move on the opportunities in Venezuela?
Yeah, I mean, the first step is some of these investors or potential investors need to get a license from OFAC to be able to even explore this. Then they need to be able to go down there and meet with people and see what's happening and make that determination. Here's what I would say. Venezuela has a lot of oil. They do. But there's a lot of oil in other places, too. Companies are only going to invest somewhere if they know we're going to invest, we're going to make our money back with a profit, and our land isn't going to be taken from us. And have you tried?
So is the world still running out of oil, or is that a narrative that has run out by now?
There's a court
Remember
we can
how
go
they
to
used
and
to say
contracts
that?
we can
There's
enforce.
only so much oil?
That's the level of certainty that we're talking in terms of security. And that's part of this transition process. That's part of this recovery process, is to normalize their industry. Because if
That's
not,
right up your
they'll just
heaven.
invest the money in Guyana. Or they'll just invest the money in some other part of the world that has oil. They're not going to risk it. So it's to their benefit to have set up a normal, transparent process that encourages foreign investment, not just in oil, by the way, and other natural resources, but in other sectors of their economy. I mean, it's unlimited, whether it's retail, whether it's banking. I mean, a country that's prosperous and generating economic activity holds the promise of all sorts of economic
I'm going to
activity,
try to squeeze in
including
one more question, if I could, just in my remaining seconds, just very briefly. We've heard such differing accounts, and the president has spoken strongly, you have as well, on the deaths in Iran and the horrible atrocities that are being committed. Can you give us some sense of, we see reports of thousands, tens of thousands. What's the State Department's best estimate of what's happened on the ground?
Well, in the thousands for certain. And look,
In Venezuela,
I think regimes, including that one in
we
Iran,
killed
have
thousands
learned
of people.
that when you start shooting people in the head with snipers, it's effective.
Oh,
I mean,
Iran.
it works, and they've
Okay,
done it, and it's
Iran.
horrifying. And that's what we've seen. That regime is probably weaker than it has ever been. And the core problem they face, unlike the protests you saw in the past on some other topics, is that they don't have a way to address the core complaints of the protesters, which is that their economy's in collapse. And the reason why there's economies in collapse is because they spend all their money and all their resources building weapons and sponsoring terrorist groups around the world instead of reinvesting it back into their society. And as a result have taken on massive global sanctions, which has isolated their economy and their country. And so that's what the Iranian people are demanding, is that they stop doing that and start caring about them and get these sanctions off them. And this regime is unwilling to do it. So the core challenge is the protests may have ebbed, but they will spark up again in the future, because this regime, unless they are willing to change and or leave, have no way of addressing the legitimate and consistent complaints of the people of Iran who deserve better.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Do we want to
Chairman.
stay
Listen, I
with
think
Senator Murphy? Let's
the
take a
scope
look.
of the
I
project
don't
that you
think
are
so.
undertaking in Venezuela is without precedent. You are taking their oil at gunpoint.
No, I don't want a little water bottle. I don't want to do Senator Murphy. I'm not a fan of Senator Murphy. We could have fun with Senator Murphy, but I'm okay. No. Yeah, let's go with this guy. Is this Kane? I think this is Kane.
And now we are nearly 5 months in. Next week is 5 months. Finally, a public hearing. Next water on September 2nd.
Senator Kane.
Some mineral that China controls, you're in a lot of trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kane.
Thank you. We started this operation on September 2nd with the attack on Venezuelans and boats in open waters. And now
What's up, Bennington?
we are nearly 5 months in. Next week is 5 months. Finally, a public hearing. Wow, how novel. Finally, a public hearing in the Senate.
This guy, this is me when I'm this guy's age, by the way. I mean, 100%. Hey, everybody. Is that what I sound like when I stream? It might be. Sometimes he puts his like glasses on his forehead and he makes him look even freaking crazier.
Senator House, this is the first public hearing we've had.
Over under. Will we get 1 second? Let's make a bet. Put a 1 inside the chat if we will get glasses on the forehead. Put a 2 inside the chat if we will not get glasses on the forehead. Get your bets in now, everybody. This is an important bet. 1 inside the chat if we get glasses on the forehead. 2 inside the chat if we don't get glasses on the forehead. We will be able to tally your bets on top of the stream, everybody, on top of the chat. Get your bets in. I'll even put a bet in. I'm putting 1 in. Glasses on forehead. We will get glasses on forehead. That's what I'm rooting for, at least. Get your bets in, everybody. Get your bets in. Okay. All right, let's go.
200 folks who are on secret designated combatant lists have been killed. U.S. troops have been injured. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent. An armada amassed.
Come on,
the
glasses.
announcement of a new Monroe Doctrine, which does not land well in the Americas. Democrats have been asking over and over again, can we have a public hearing? Can we share what we know with the American public? Finally, a public hearing. But even that hearing is
Do you have a question for the
constrained.
public hearing?
I'd like to talk about the complete weakness of the legal rationale about the strikes on boats in international waters, but I can't because the administration has only shared it with members in a classified setting.
Come on,
I can't
glasses
tell
on
you
forehead. Here it
why
comes.
the domestic rationale is hollow and the international rationale is hollow. I can't tell you why the rationale for attacking Venezuela is hollow because, again, the rationale has been shared with us in a closed setting. I can't share with you the grim details of the murder of shipwrecked survivors in open waters that we all know because we've seen the videos and we've questioned the U.S. military officials involved about legality because the administration will not release that publicly. They released the boat strike videos publicly, but they hid the second strike that killed struggling shipwreck survivors, even from Congress, for near.
So it was fine for us to kill them while they were driving to America with drugs, but as long as they were in the water struggling, we weren't able to kill them. Who gives a shit, man?
Really 3 months, but I can't really talk to you about
Don't care about that at all.
I can't talk to you about the weakness of the targeting criteria being used to attack boats in the Caribbean and Pacific. I would encourage any colleague, if you have not, go to the classified setting and ask for a briefing on each strike and ask this question: what was the evidence that there were narcotics on that craft? You will be very surprised if you ask that question about every
I thought that we
strike.
couldn't talk about this.
And so even in this first public hearing, 5 months in, there's a lot we can't talk about. If it was such a righteous operation, why is the administration and the majority in this Senate so jealously protecting the details about it
Kane.
from being revealed to
Glasses
the American public?
on
I have
the
Virginians
forehead.
deployed in this operation. I can't answer their families' questions. Thank God we're having a public hearing 5 months in.
Do you have a question
this is
for the
supposed to be
public
the
hearing,
greatest
sir?
deliberative body
Here
in
come
the
the
world.
glasses.
Mr. Secretary,
Here come the
who won
glasses.
the July 2024 Venezuelan presidential election?
Oh, I think the whole world would acknowledge it was Edmundo Gonzalez.
Who lost that election?
Maduro.
And his vice president, Delcy Rodriguez. Now, you have made the decision, the administration has made
It's
the
gonna
decision
happen.
in the
It's
aftermath
gonna
of the
happen.
attack that Delcy Rodriguez should be leading the country. Let me read something that President Trump said about her.
Read it. Put it on your
On
forehead.
January 14 about Delcy Rodriguez, who lost the election with Maduro. We just had a great conversation today.
Bets
She's
are
a
still
terrific
open.
person.
Get
I
your
mean,
bets in.
she's
One
somebody
for
that we have
glasses
worked
on
with very
forehead.
well. Let
Two
me
for
tell you
none.
what Delcy Rodriguez said the day after Venezuela was attacked. Governments around the world are simply shocked that the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is the victim and target of an attack
Here
of
it
this
comes.
nature, which undoubtedly has Zionist undertones. What the hell did Delcy Rodriguez mean when she said this attack
What a
had
win!
Zionist undertones?
What a win!
I'm assuming you have no idea.
That's what
Oh,
I'm
I have an
talking
idea what she
about.
meant. I mean, what's the question?
What does she mean when she says this attack has Zionist undertones?
Look, I have to answer, but let me understand in a broader context. No one here
There
is
we
telling you this is
go.
what we want to see in the long term.
Okay.
This is not a campaign to leave in place the system that's currently in place.
Let me switch.
But we either
let
have,
me-
no, but I mean, the criticism
No,
of us is, all right, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm ready to switch now to talk about somebody that you
thought
know
you raised
well.
an important point. If I can get back to it, I will.
You know well and you respect well, Maria
Bam!
Machado. Here's what President Trump said about her. Won the Nobel Prize.
I
in the
watch way
aftermath
too
the
many of
attack on
these.
Venezuela. I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect. What did President Trump mean by that?
Yeah. First of all, I've known Maria Corina for probably 12 years,
I know you
13
have.
years. Have dealt with her probably more than as much as anybody on this committee has for certain. And I'll be meeting with her today, in fact. And we met with her a couple weeks ago. So here's the reality, though, and I think what the president was pointing to. And I think Maria Corina would acknowledge this.
The only way I talked to her last week.
Well,
She's very disappointed in those comments, and so are Venezuelans in my state.
Okay, well, she didn't share that with me or
Are
with
they
us, but I
legal
would sell this
Venezuelans?
to you. For the president is acknowledging is that today, as it stands, whether we like it or not, the elements of control in that country, the people with the guns, the people that control the guns and the institutions of government there, are in the hands of this regime. So we either, on the one hand, we're getting criticized. Some people are saying we don't want regime change. On the other hand, we're being criticized for not undertaking regime change.
Mr. Secretary,
What we're trying to trigger here is a process of stabilization, recovery, and transition to something where Maria Corina and others can be a part of. And that's what we're working
You have
for.
respect for her, don't you?
Sure.
Okay, great. My last question is this.
And so does the president, by the way. He met with her. They had a great meeting. And he actually spoke to her last week in my presence.
Here's what he said after that meeting. We're talking to her, and maybe we can get her involved in some way. I'd love to be able to do that. Maybe we can do that. We'll set the terms for this Nobel Prize winner having a leadership role. Last question is this. You talked about the speech in Davos. Here's something the president said in Davos. I'm helping NATO until the last few days. When I told them about Iceland, they loved me. They're not here for us on Iceland, that I can tell you. Our stock market took the first dip yesterday because of Iceland, so Iceland has already cost us a lot of money. The president repeatedly mistook Iceland for Greenland, right? We're not mad at Iceland. They haven't cost us any money. The president just mistook the two countries for each other, correct?
Yeah, he meant to say Greenland, but I think we're all familiar with presidents that have verbal stumbles. We've had presidents like that before. Some made a lot more than this one.
Nice try. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I thought he did well. Let's see, we got Senator Paul.
Let's go with Rand Paul. We will
Our
continue.
founders debated extensively over which branch of government should have the power to declare or initiate war. Virtually unanimously, they decided, and what was entered into the Constitution was that the declaration or initiation of war would be the power of Congress. Now, we have many advocates, many of whom are here today, who have been advocates for an expansive notion of presidential power. They often argue that wars are not really wars, that they're kinetic actions or drug busts.
By the way, what a great, great moment. Kane puts his glasses on the forehead like we predicted. I mean, it happens every time.
I think, though, if you reverse the circumstances, it becomes very difficult for
Great
these
reaction
arguments
from
to
Mr.
hold up.
Rotella.
So I would ask you, if a foreign country bombed our air defense missiles, captured and removed
We're
our
gonna make that
president
micro
and
content
blockaded
tomorrow.
our country, would that be considered an act of war?
Well, I think your question is about and I will acknowledge you've been very consistent on all these points the entire career. So let me, no matter who's in charge. So I will point to two things.
What's
the
up,
first
Zero?
Is it's hard
Welcome
for
in.
us to conceive
Ely
that an
Domer.
operation that lasted about 4.5 hours and was a law enforcement operation to capture someone we don't recognize as a head of state, indicted in the United States, wanted with a $50 million
My
bounty.
question would be, if it only took 4 hours to take our president, it's very short, nobody dies on the other side, nobody dies on our side, it's perfect. Would it be an act of war?
We just don't believe that this operation comes anywhere close to the constitutional definition of
But
war.
would it be an act of war if someone did it to us? Nobody dies, few casualties, they're in and out. Boom, it's a perfect military operation. Would that be an act of war? Of course it would be an act of war. I'm probably the most anti-war person in the Senate, and I would vote to declare war if someone invaded our country and took our president. So I think we need to at least acknowledge this is a one-way argument. One-way argument.
Ron Cargo, Ely Domer, treasurer of the Dome, says Maduro was not president, dickhead, says Ron. Well, then why didn't someone come in here and do the same thing to Biden? That's my question. See, this is why I'm so America first. No one came to help us. People wanted Biden to win. People wanted the stolen election around the world. Why are we helping the rest of the world if no one's going to come and help us in our moment of need?
Arguments that
Fuck the
don't
world.
rebound, that you can't apply to yourselves, that cannot be universally applicable are bad arguments. So my next question would be, let's say it's not a war. And we're just going to define it away and say it's not a war. That's one of the arguments. So it's a drug bust. What if a foreign country indicts our president for violating a foreign law? Should we extradite our president, or should we be okay if they come in and get him by force?
Look, I think ultimately we're always going to act in our national interest. And so if somebody comes after our national interest, like the case you've described, which obviously does not exist at this time, but the case you've described, the U.S. always has the right to act in its national interest and to protect itself.
So really
I don't know about this equivalency. Well, does this justify them doing it? We're always going to do what's best for the United States and America. We're always going to protect our system.
But the point isn't, and you're exactly right, we will act in our national interest and we should. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all. What I'm saying is, though, that our arguments are empty then. The drug bust isn't really an argument. It's a ruse. The war argument, not a war, is a ruse. It's not a real argument. And we do what we do because we have the force, we have the might, we do it because it's in our interest. So we wouldn't let anybody come in, bomb us, blockade us, and take our president. We've had arguments about legitimate, illegitimate presidents, bad elections, rigged elections. So there's all kinds of same arguments that we've had in our country that they've had in Venezuela. But we wouldn't argue for an indictment. And these things aren't idle speculation. I mean, Netanyahu's been indicted by the ICC.
You know what would have made a great Putin and Russia baby face moment? I mean, we got the Royal Rumble coming up this weekend, my friends. I've been thinking a lot about wrestling this week. What would have been a great Putin and Russia baby face moment? Biden steals the election a year in. Putin and Russia, their music hits, they come into the ring, they fucking stun Biden, they take him out just like we did to Maduro. Putin, Putin, Putin. We install President Trump and bam, we're off to the races to WrestleMania.
And one of the reasons I object to being part of the ICC,
Good booking,
and I would say
Mr. Rotella.
You and the administration probably agree, is we're not going to let any international council indict our president and arrest him somewhere on foreign soil. We're not going to do that. We actually, most of us probably object to indicting Netanyahu in that way as well. So I think the arguments are invalid. So we did get the legal opinion that Senator Kaine referred to, the OLC opinion, Office of Legal Counsel. And I think a lot of it's been released. Plus, they came to our caucus and talked most of the open about everything they had classified. So I will talk about at least one of the arguments. They say this war wasn't a constitutional war. Therefore, it doesn't rise to the constitutional notion of us declaring or having to initiate the war. It just doesn't rise. And one of their main arguments was not enough people died. And so there is some number that they aren't specific, but there is some number. I would assume, although I'm not positive, but the 50, 60,000 soldiers who died in Vietnam might be enough for them to call that a war. But here's the problem. It isn't the number, it's that it happens in retrospect. See, our founders gave us the power to initiate or declare war. They didn't give us other powers to execute the war. Those are left to the president. But if we have to wait to see how many people are killed, we have to wait, as they describe it, as the scope, nature, and extent. If we have to wait to see the scope, nature, and extent, the war has been going on for some time. It's hard to vote to initiate a war that's been going on. And we can say this war is over, but we're still blockading it, and we may go back in.
I was so much more entertaining,
But there are
Paul.
no
Come
clear
on, let's
answers.
go, Rand.
You know, we put 2,000, we leave 2,000 troops in. Are we going to call that war and initiate it? So the definition of war is very important. And I think we have to acknowledge the problems with our argument. Calling things kinetic action is a disservice to our soldiers. Oh, you weren't really...
Ron Cargo says, vote this asshole out. Were you ever a fan of his dad? Ron, I'm interested in that because I'm pretty sure that Ron Paul was the first ever presidential vote I ever made.
Wounded in war, you don't have a Medal of Honor for war.
I know I voted for him.
I'm
just not sure if it was my first one ever.
So I think let's call it what it is, and let's vote on these things. But I think we're in violation of both the spirit and the law of the Constitution by bombing a capital, blockading a country, and removing elected officials. And we certainly wouldn't tolerate it, nor would I if someone did it to us.
But we didn't remove an elected official. We removed someone who was not elected, and it was actually an indicted drug trafficker in the United States, and their system...
Our laws, indicted under our laws. Look, Bolsonaro says that Da Silva is not really the president of Brazil. Our president said Biden wasn't really the president. Hillary Clinton said in 2016 Trump wasn't the president. So you have these arguments, and I agree with you, it probably was, and most likely was, most assuredly was a bad election. He wasn't really elected. But at the same time, if that's our predicate, and you don't have to come to us because it's a drug bust, we're just removing somebody, you can see what it leads to. And it leads to chaos. And that's why we have rules like the Constitution, so we don't get so far out there that presidents can do whatever they want. It is this check and balance. And I would argue for 70 years we've been going the wrong way. It isn't just this president, but it's a debate that I think is worth having.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to associate myself with the comments of Tim Kaine. The fact that we're 5 months into this and this is the first oversight hearing is really a complete failure of the responsibility.
Looks boring. Rick Scott from Florida, no. Florida senators need a lot of work. Cory Booker. Okay, sure, I'll bite.
With the recognition that, more work needs to be done.
I'll bite.
Thanks for your hard work.
Senator Booker.
I just want to start by saying what's plain, frankly, be plain to Senator Rubio and plain to members here, is that it should not have taken this long to have this hearing.
Thanks.
Fundamentally, we have a crisis, I believe, in our democracy right now, which is the failure of Congress to do its job, to provide checks and balances, oversight, to provide the kind of constitutionally...
This guy sounds and speaks like we're on like some kind of presidential ride at Disneyland or something. Like this is what the halls of Senate sound like. And here in the halls of Senate...
mandated work that we should be doing to keep a balanced government.
Democracy.
We have operations right now that are literally costing the American taxpayer tens of millions of dollars a day. The buildup in the Caribbean alone is hundreds of millions of dollars a month, but we're not providing that kind of oversight that's necessary. So from our power to the purse, to our important work of providing a check and balance to an administration,
not very closeted,
what we're
Terry.
seeing right now is unacceptable and speaks to what I think is a growing constitutional crisis in our country, which is Congress is just lying down for the administration to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants. I want to pick up on my colleague's questioning because I actually know from years of conversations with you, your heart about human rights in countries like Venezuela.
Did we need the glasses?
Mr. Secretary. And you issued a travel warning, a level 4 travel advisory from your department's website that says, right now in Venezuela, there's a high risk of wrongful detention, torture, terrorism, kidnapping, arbitrary enforcement of laws, crime, and more. And when we hear from the president that he is in charge, that you all are running this government to that extent, I have a lot of concerns when it comes to the rampant human rights violations that are persisting. Cabello is Maduro's key hardline enforcer. He's continued to intimidate and suppress Venezuelan voices. He remains in control of Venezuela's security forces, security services, the colectivos. We're seeing extraordinary examples that the constant oppression of the people is continuing as these folks are remaining in control of the country. So I just want to know, what is the plan to address in a much more aggressive manner these severe human rights violations and to try to stop these armed militias? Because if we are doing things to stabilize their government, if we're turning over resources and money to the very groups that are creating these horrors, that seems to me against America's values, and it seems to me something that is should be unacceptable to Congress on both sides.
This is why I don't have
well,
public
absolutely.
conversations.
The Venezuela I described that we want to see emerge from this is one in which none of that is happening. If you think about travel advisories are us imagining worst case scenarios. We have a duty to warn American citizens when they travel to a place that does have a history of Americans being arrested, of Americans being taken. And they may be taken by a deliberate action of a government or entity related to the regime. They may be taken by criminal gangs that control parts of that society. For example, you know, they have these colectivos, as they're called, which basically are these armed motorcycle gangs that are allowed to act with impunity in return for their support for the Maduro regime in the past. You have the ELN and the FARC and other drug traffickers.
We're gonna run into some motorcycle gangs when we begin Grand Theft Auto Liberty City episodes on Saturday at 2 p.m. behind the Rumble paywall. Make sure you're here, everybody. Mr. Rotella bringing back Grand Theft Auto to the stream. It is a great time. Saturday, 2 p.m.
Organizations, including Train Agua, that are involved.
Again.
So these are real risks that we have a duty to warn Americans, because here's what we didn't want to see, and I don't mean to interrupt you. We have this announcement that Maduro's been taken. All of a sudden, people conclude, oh, he's gone, let's flood over there, let's all go over there, and we could expose people to dangers.
But this is the hypocrisy that I see. At the same time that you're issuing these human rights cautions about what's going on there for Americans, you have a president that's lifting temporary protected status for Venezuelans. Many of them are individuals that have lived in our country for years, if not decades. When I hear from the Venezuelan community, I hear an outrage that at the very same time that you are affirming here that these armed militias are running around suppressing voices, we have an administration that has said very clearly that they're not only going to be lifting temporary protected status for Venezuelans living in the U.S., but instead of protecting longtime American residents, they are, quote, the administration is putting people back on deportation flights and sending them into that madness. Does that make sense to you?
Well, first of all, the travel
Sounds like
advisories
it's
for
not any
American
of our
citizens traveling
problem.
there and the threats posed to Americans. What you're
But
describing
why lift temporary protected status?
Well, the problem with temporary protective status was it was granted to so many people in such a vast numbers so quickly without proper vetting by the previous administration that there's a real concern that there were gang members that had received TPS simply because of the nation they came from and the time in which they came. It became so big and so massive. The overwhelming majority of Venezuelans are not members of Train Agua, but there were Train Agua and other criminal elements embedded in the TPS system. And the numbers were so large that the administration felt it had to cancel the program in order to appropriately vet it through on the individual cases.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, this might not surprise you. I don't trust this administration and the way they use terms like terrorist. I've seen them calling American citizens domestic terrorists who are people.
I'm pretty sure we can find this guy saying the exact same thing about Republicans. I bet he said the same thing about January 6 people, domestic terrorists, blah, blah, blah. Seth has become a new elite domer, ladies and gentlemen. Perfect timing, Seth. That's what I'm talking about. Seth, thank you so much for becoming an elite domer. You have no idea how much that is a huge deal, Mr. Seth. Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Ballyho's in the chat for Seth, everybody. That's what I'm talking about.
People trying to peacefully protest.
Let's go.
The problem we have right now
is
the administration
deal.
continues to make policies that seem to contradict their
A small investment for you, life-changing for Mr. Rotella. Belly Joseph.
Words, and yet we don't have a process in place for Congress to do its job because people are not calling folks in for these hearings and not providing the kind of oversight that we need. It is very frustrating to me that we still have a repressive regime in power in Venezuela, suppressing human rights, yet we are cooperating with them. We are funding them, and we're not calling out the ridiculousness of the violence that's going on there. At the same time, we're taking people who have lived in our country for years and years and years and sending them back into that hell where they can be targeted, where they can be abducted, where they can be held for hostage because they know they have American family members that are still here. This is a situation ripe for where we are being complicit in continuing human rights violations, and that needs to stop. And I thank you.
Just on 2 points. We're not cooperating with them to continue doing what they're doing now. We're cooperating with them to transition away from what's happening now. And as I said, we're not even 4 weeks into this thing. And if it continues to look like this in 6 months, 9 months, a year from now, if progress isn't being made, we'll have very different feelings about it. But what we're cooperating on is not the continuation of what's happening. It's a movement away from all this and transitioning ultimately to something that looks nothing like this. That's the goal. But it's been less than 4 weeks. I mean, we think we've made substantial progress in a very short period of time, but I acknowledge we want to make a lot more progress. This is not the end state that we want.
Senator Cornyn.
Cornyn, no, absolutely not. We are rooting for Ken Paxton to beat this guy in the Texas Republican Senate primary. Oh, yeah. I think this chick goes off, usually.
Do I understand that you're yielding to Senator Duckworth? Is that correct? Both of you? Senator Van Hollen? Are you going to yield to Senator Duckworth? Okay. Senator Duckworth.
I thank my colleagues. My daughter has dental surgery, so they're being very kind so I can get her to that. Thank you. Mr. Secretary, last March, the president invoked the Alien Enemies Act, a notorious wartime law last used for Japanese internment. He said that he was responding to the Maduro regime's supposed invasion or other acts
What was that look for? Were you put in the internment camp? What was that look for?
Act, a notorious wartime law last used for Japanese internment. Enemies Act, a notorious wartime law last used for Japanese internment.
Were you a part of that? What are you so upset about? Was that Marco Rubio that made that happen? Like, what are we upset about?
He said that he was responding to the Maduro regime's supposed invasion or other acts of war against the United States. But in recent weeks, you, the Department of Justice, and our friends across the aisle have repeatedly said that we are not at war with Venezuela. Secretary Rubio, if that is true and we are not at war with Venezuela, will you advise the president to rescind his invocation of the Wartime Alien Enemies Act?
Well, that was a mechanism to remove people from our country that prevent grave danger. So, for example, we know for a fact that Tren de Agua is a very dangerous gang. In fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I may have been the first member of Congress.
This is a wartime act, Mr. Secretary.
Well,
are we currently at war with Venezuela?
No, we're not in a state of war in Venezuela.
Okay, the Supreme Court has described the Alien Enemies Act as a wartime power, our Supreme Court. And before now, the Alien Enemies Act was only invoked during the War of 1812, World War I, World War II, when it was used to intern thousands of innocent civilians. Are you really arguing that the president should be able to wield an internment law?
No, but we're talking about two separate things here. So you're talking about the state of Venezuela or are describing the regime.
And
we're talking about, but what the president designated.
Invoked the Alien Enemies Act.
I know, Senator, but let me be clear with you. No, but what the president was talking about are these gangs that have, and these narco-trafficking groups that are waging war on the United States. There's no doubt. These groups have waged war on the United States. They have waged, for example, Tren de Agua is not just a criminal gang presence in our street. It is a criminal gang directly responsible for narco-trafficking.
The Trump administration has acknowledged that the vast majority of the men rounded up and deported to torture under this law had no criminal records.
Torture? Who the fuck has been tortured? What are you talking about? Oh my God, who's writing this shit? Look at this. Look at the chicks behind her. These are her little helpers, her little whisperers. These are the people writing this. Who is being tortured? Who has ever been tortured?
Whatsoever.
We didn't torture
Independent, over 75%.
Who did we torture? We haven't tortured anybody. We've arrested people that are members of gangs and we've deported them. We don't want gang members.
As smart as the
Secretary of State. Many of the men were here legally. If the administration is willing to lie about who it's targeting under this law, What protections do totally innocent people have against abuse? Again, I want to ask
tell
you,
us who we've tortured.
will you advise the president to rescind his invocation of the Wartime Alien Enemies
No, of course
Act?
not. I mean, these are people that are threats to the national security of the United States. But I've described this in hearings in the past, including
So
before
you're
you guys.
saying that we're at war?
We are absolutely, when it comes to narco trafficking groups and criminal gangs that are targeting the United States for criminal
We're in a state of
activity,
war.
There's no doubt about the fact
Well,
that
what happened to the war on drugs, lady?
we're
So then,
confronting them in a
do they-
war like
Nancy Reagan is turning in her grave.
said it
National
because
laws
they're
of
waging
war
war on us.
apply, and do the Geneva Convention
They're waging
apply?
war against us and their enemy combatants as a result of it. And the fact of the matter is that we are confronting these irregular groups, and that's one of the great challenges of the new century in this hemisphere in particular, is that these non-state actors who possess state-like capabilities in terms of their weaponry pose a grave danger to the United States. I don't think any American would dispute that we have cartels that pose a threat to the national security
with
of the
all
United
of the
States.
other laws of when it comes to warfare. I mean, you're saying that
Are we
he
lost?
can invoke this wartime
Are we lost?
power.
No,
You
I'm
sound
saying,
lost.
you're asking me, I'm here to discuss foreign policy and what's in the realm of the Department of State.
Well, you
I think
don't
your
think,
questions
you don't
are better
think
directed to the
invoking
Department
the
of
Alien
Justice.
Enemies Act,
But I would tell
which
you
is
that.
a wartime, which is something that
Yeah,
our
but you're
Supreme
asking me a
Court
question
said
that's-
can be invoked during
All right, but
wartime.
you're
and it's
asking
only
me a
been
question
invoked
that's
during the
more
War of
appro-
1812, World War I, and World War II.
You're
It's only
asking
been
me a
invoked 3
question-
times, and this president is invoking it.
Okay, you're asking me a question about the domestic application of a law that's best directed
not
to the
a
Department of
complication.
Justice.
It's
No,
not a
it is,
complication. It's
because you're
very
asking me
simple.
something to opine on something that's in the realm of the Department of Justice in terms of its domestic application. I can tell you that the United States is most certainly confronting terrorist and criminal organizations operating in our hemisphere that pose a grave danger to the United States. Anyone who believes that gangs that flood our country with fentanyl
All right,
or
let me
cocaine
ask you
are
this.
not threats to the United States is not living in reality and certainly does not reflect the opinion of most Americans.
The president already said that he was ready to
Boom.
put American troops in Venezuela again. So we're at war right now.
When did he
So
say
if
that?
things don't go well with the Chavistas you've empowered,
When did the president
what is your
say he was gonna put
criteria for
troops in
returning
Venezuela?
a military option, putting you? What is your criteria for returning to a military option and putting boots on?
Well, I don't recall the president saying he was going to put troops in Venezuela. Where did he say that?
I'm asking you, what are your?
But that's what you said. I didn't
Yeah,
remember
the president has
saying
already
that.
said that he was ready to put
When?
American troops in Venezuela.
No, I think the president has said that he retains the right as commander-in-chief to protect the United States against any imminent threats. Maybe that involves troops, maybe that involves air power. We hope, but we don't anticipate that being the case in Venezuela.
I worry that you are playing fast and loose with our nation's
Well, I just gave
military.
you
And
testimony
let me
here
just say,
for
I just want to conclude by
Yeah, but I just gave you testimony of how well things are moving forward, not as fast
Yeah,
as
but
everybody
you
would like.
also said
So
that in 6 or 9 months, if things don't go well, you're going to have to do something else. And the president's already said that he's not ruled out the military option. And you've also just said that, yes, we are at war. The president has
But
wartime
every
powers.
president retains
So
the power
it's
to use military to
reasonable for me
protect-
to ask you,
And I gave you a very specific example. Every president retains the right to defend the United States against an imminent threat. Yes, if there are just give you an example, Iranian drones deployed in Venezuela that could threaten the United States, we most certainly will address that, even if it's located in Venezuela. But we hope we don't get to that point. We don't expect to get to that point.
I don't think that-
We're not trending in that direction. That's a fact. But that said,
trend is
on
your
the
the
one
people of
hand,
America are
people here
worried that
unhappy
this
we're
is a president who
cooperating with
engages
Venezuela.
in yet
On the other hand,
another
they want us to
forever
go to
war,
with
Mr.
them.
Secretary.
What's
We
that?
don't need to be in another forever war. And that is the path that we are going towards. And let me just say.
Well, how are we
let me
going towards
conclude-
a
let me
forever
just- let
war
me
if we're
just
dealing with
conclude.
we're
Well,
dealing
you're
with
not
Delcy
ruling out a
Rodriguez every
military
day?
option. You're not going to ask him to rescind his invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. That puts Americans in jeopardy. And let me just say something about the president's recent comments about NATO allies. When I served in Iraq, there were Polish.
NATO sucks. What do we get out of NATO? Will NATO actually be able to defend us if we need NATO? I don't fucking think so. NATO survives because of us. Why do we care what they say?
Forces there with us. There were British forces there with us. There were Spanish forces there with us. I personally landed in Elzi, España, which came under direct attack by
No
insurgents.
one knows where that is.
Polish troops who worked with the Illinois military, with the Illinois National Guard for 30 years, died in Afghanistan, Mr. Secretary.
All the
So
president
I just
wants
want
is
to
for
say
NATO to
is
have
that
more
our NATO allies
capabilities.
have stood beside us.
wants our allies to
and
have more
we
NATO.
need to maintain the strength of that alliance.
I get it.
yield
All
back.
the
Your
president wants is
your
our
time's
allies.
up. Not making much progress here.
Well, let me just
Very
say, the
much.
president
Let's-
just wants our allies to have more capabilities to be involved in operations like that, God forbid, in the future if necessary.
That's not what he
an
said.
unreasonable
He said
request.
that they stayed a little behind, and they certainly did not come to our
Reclaiming
defense.
my time.
And
Well, not
they
every
did.
country in Europe, not every country in NATO participated in those missions. Some did.
Denmark suffered some of the greatest military casualties.
There's no doubt that many of our allies have stepped forward and provided
Valio,
assistance
Denmark,
to us.
good luck
and there are
out
many
there.
others that simply don't have the capability to do it now or in the future.
That's not what the president said.
So
Senator
that's what he
Lee,
was pointing to.
Let's go to Mike Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank
we
you,
will stay with
Secretary
Mike
Rubio,
Lee.
for being here. I also want to thank you for reaching out to me the night of the execution of the arrest warrant against Nicolas Maduro. I could tell when we talked that you had been up all night, and it was kind of you to reach out to me and describe what had happened that evening. I've long been a believer in the fact that the United States has been abundantly blessed by geography. God and nature's God have blessed the American continent with two vast oceans, one to our east, one to our west, that have protected us from the old powers of other parts of the world.
And
we
should
should
keep
use
it
those
that
to
way.
our advantage. At times in our past, we have somewhat neglected the Western Hemisphere in recent decades, and I'm pleased that you and President Trump have been
What's up, Lee
refocusing on
Katz?
the Western
Welcome back.
Hemisphere. As we look at burden sharing in other parts of the world and pivot some of this focus back to our own hemisphere, tell me what that looks like. Tell me what it looks like to orient some of our burden sharing toward our own hemisphere.
Well, I think you're
there's now a
seeing
lot
some
of
of it now.
Orients.
Look, our hope is eventually not to have a military presence of the kind you've seen in the Caribbean to deal with this very acute
Based on
matter.
our hemisphere.
But the truth of the matter is that it was surprising in the first place, right? If these ships and these assets were deployed in the Indo-Pacific or in the Mediterranean or in the Middle East somewhere, no one would blink an eye. They say, well, that's normal. That's what we always do. The fact that they were deployed in the Western Hemisphere was a shock to everybody because we haven't done it. In fact, according to South
Eddie with a raid. Ballyho Eddie, I appreciate that, sir. Ballyho Eddie. Everybody say Ballyho to Eddie. And Fat Kitchen comes in with a $10 dome investment. Says, end of the month late fee, Mr. Rotella. NATO can ingest a package of pennies. Thank you, Fat Kitchen, helping us end the month strong. I appreciate that. And Eddie, thank you for the raid, my friend. Ballyho.
They've rarely have ever had assets permanently deployed to
Awesome.
them. They may have been transiting through at some point, but not permanently
Ballyho, Eddie.
deployed to deal with a very acute matter. And that is, and these are, these things become interrelated here at some point, but they are separate in many ways. And it's part of what I was trying to explain to Senator Duckworth. We have a real reality in our region of these transnational criminal terrorist organizations.
I thought that was going a
that in many
completely
cases
opposite
possess
way.
weapons that you ascribe to a nation state, not to a gang, who pose a grave threat to the national security of the United States, but also to the stability of the region. If you walk through the region, what is the primary threat in Colombia? Transnational criminal organizations. What is the threat to Mexico? What is the threat to the Caribbean basin? These groups have to be confronted. They have to be confronted forcefully. What's the threat in Haiti to systemic collapse? And that is these criminal gangs that basically control territory and threaten the ability to even form a government there in that regard. So it's endemic throughout the region, and it ultimately impacts the United States through mass migration, through drug trafficking, and other related criminal.
Fat Kitchen says not pennies. Did I read that wrong? End of the month late fee, Mr. Rotella. NATO can ingest a package of penises. Penises, not pennies. Well, thank God I went back and read that. Thank you, Fat Kitchen.
Organizations. And so we need to have a force posture that can confront that and that can provide assistance in conjunction with other partners. We also need more countries that are willing to cooperate with us and collaboratively work on these things, the way Ecuador is now doing, the way El Salvador has done, the way Trinidad and Jamaica and other countries, the way we historically have done with Colombia, by the way, and continue to do in many respects. So we hope Venezuela will be one of those. Imagine if a future, or even the current interim authorities, or a future legitimate government of Venezuela cooperated with the United
What's
States
up, WS?
against
Welcome in.
Trinidad, cooperated with the United States against the ELN, the FARC, and the drug trafficking organizations. How much easier it would be to confront these challenges that we face. But it will require some force posture in the region. I think the one area, if your question is in the context of NATO, the one area we have to recognize is that we need to have a presence in the Indo-Pacific. Many of you travel overseas and are constantly being told by our Indo-Pacific allies they want to see a sustained commitment of the United
Aria
States
has
to the region. We still
Lee Katz says, has Aria moved since 2 days ago? She has a shock collar that leaves her in that same space every single day.
have
She's not allowed
obligations
to
and
move.
needs that we need to address when it comes to the Middle East. We have a growing threat of the rise of terrorism potentially in the African continent. And then, of course, you point to the Western Hemisphere. So that doesn't mean we're abandoning NATO or abandoning Europe. It does mean that we are going to have to, at some point, readjust our force posture in the world to deal with all of these realities. And as a result is why I keep making the point, the stronger our allies and more capable our allies in NATO are, the more flexibility we'll have to do that. We'll still be there with our assurances. We'll still be there with our presence. We'll still have some of the largest military deployments in the world.
Can we open up an In-N-Out burger?
With our allies. But we are going to need some flexibility to do this over time. And we've told this to our allies. And we told them there'll be no surprises.
God, I wish they would make
and
an
most
In-N-Out
of them
burger in
understand
Florida.
it. Frankly, they do. And that's why they're moving very quickly in many cases to rearm and reinvigorate themselves.
The nearest In-N-Out burger to Mr. Rotella, and I've looked it up. I've looked it up a few times. I have not had an In-N-Out burger in like 6 years at this point. Oh my God, has it been 6 years? I have to drive all the way to Texas to find one. And I just can't do that. I mean, is it worth it? It might be worth it.
Last 5 to 10 years, we've seen China gain pretty significant footholds by historical standards in South America, in Central America, in parts of the Caribbean. Sometimes this occurs simultaneously with and in the same places as drug cartels.
That's the only thing Florida's missing.
Places where drug cartels are the strongest.
Welcome in, Goofy.
How would you
Jesus.
describe the connection between those two things? Are they correlated, or is there causal?
Well, the correlation maybe to the extent that you have, usually when you have strong narco organizations or drug trafficking organizations, you also have very weak states that are, in some cases, vulnerable to corruption. So the general Chinese practice has been, you go into a country, you offer to build a bunch of stuff that you end up building poorly. And to get that contract, you do it as a market share thing, not because you can make money off it, but because it puts you in place at the expense of everybody else. You sometimes have to bribe people locally in order to get that, and it gives you a foothold into that country and allows you to expand into other sectors. In some cases, frankly, it has been like in telecommunications, because Huawei shows up with a deal, and no Western company shows up with a deal that's affordable, and so they go with Huawei because they want to have 4G, not to mention 5G. Huawei provides a product that's not the best, but it's good enough, and they can afford it.
What about 8G?
And it's subsidized by the Chinese government. So we've seen that play out in place after place. It became quite acute, for example, in the Panama Canal Zone, where a Chinese company ended up owning both ports on the Pacific and on the Caribbean side and Atlantic side of that canal, which is of grave concern to the United States. So I do think you've seen their presence, largely through economic means over time, create leverage over nations in the country who become emboldened and either trapped in debt traps or trapped in bad contracts they can't get themselves out of, and always in sectors that are valuable to China that include rare earths, and critical minerals, energy, and infrastructure.
Senator Schatz.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Ranking.
No. I mean, right? Look at this guy. Look at that quarter zip vest. Hard no. I don't trust anyone that wears a vest, let alone a freaking politician. That's why I could never get behind Youngkin. All right, let's go to this chick, and then I think we're going to get out of here.
Gore, that, as you know, is in India, is also an envoy to these three countries, just came back from Tajikistan a couple days ago. So I think that absolutely we would like to see that, because it would allow us to do even more.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member, and thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. I'm going to get right into it because I want to build on Senator Van Hollen's line of questioning. President Trump pardoned the former Honduran president after he was convicted of trafficking roughly 400 tons of cocaine into the United States.
Thank you for that.
Cocaine that contributed to the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans year after year.
Oh, well, I mean,
Yet
way
the
to bring
president
down
and
the
his
Coke
cabinet
party.
authorized a military operation to capture Nicolas Maduro in order to arrest him for virtually the same crime. So, yes or no, because I have a bunch of questions here. To the best of your knowledge, was Hernandez convicted of trafficking approximately 400 tons of cocaine into the United States?
I'm not involved in the pardon process. I can tell you.
No,
that
I've just
the
asked
president,
if he...
Yeah, but I don't do yes or no. I don't play games. This is not a game show.
Do you know he was... okay, so I'm just going to tell you he
So
was...
I can answer your question because I know what you're getting at, but go ahead.
He was convicted. I know
The president
agree
felt
with-
that he was unfairly treated. I can't, but I
Sure,
can't give
Sharon's
you much
here.
insight because I'm not involved in the pardon process.
Would you not concede? Can you not understand how the American people and how the world are clearly going to be frustrated by the hypocrisy of this when one man is convicted and pardoned and another man captured, and how it undermines the United States' credibility on the world stage?
No, but the difference is that, again, I can't opine on the specific.
Hey, Seth. Seth says, W. Rubio. Seth, thank you again for becoming an elite domer tonight. That is a big deal, dude. Thank you very much, sir.
Of his case, because I wasn't involved in the pardon, but he was not a sitting office holder. He was not even the president of Honduras when that decision was made, either to convict him. The difference between him and Nicolas Maduro is he was actively engaged in narco trafficking. It was an ongoing endeavor.
I think it does undermine our credibility, but I'm going to move on to some foreign policy decision-making here, because despite the fact that you
How many necklaces is she
famously or
wearing?
infamously have numerous
I think
jobs
that's
in the
a bike chain
administration,
around
your
her neck.
Secretary of State, your National Security Advisor, it is increasingly unclear.
See that, friends? Come for the congressional hearings. Stay for the fashion.
Who's actually directing U.S. foreign policy under
I love the
President Trump.
fashion.
We have a special envoy Witkoff. He's reportedly conducted Russian-Ukraine talks in Switzerland beyond your awareness. He and Jared Kushner have been described as managing the president's Gaza plan. Meanwhile, Ambassador Barrack is leading on Syria policy, while Special Envoy Boulos is appearing to lead on our Africa policy. So I have to ask you, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you, are you the lead for U.S. government on foreign policy?
No. The lead on U.S. foreign policy is named Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States. On the individuals you've described, these are very valuable teams. We have an if I can answer, because I think it's important. It's a legitimate question. I have the distinction, but I think both the benefit of being the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State. As National Security Advisor, my job is to coordinate the interagency function of national security, and that involves foreign policy. So I speak to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in the case of Gaza and now Russia, probably 10 times a day.
Have you guys seen the plans for Gaza? They're in our archives. I mean, they look nice.
Have multiple meetings and coordination. All of it is we build a team, we gather facts, we present options, and then we take them to the president. It is the president who directs the the foreign policy of the United States. That's always been the case, by the way.
You can't overrule their decisions. Do you outrank the special envoys and ambassadors? Do they get your input as
Well, as an
Do
example,
they care about your input, or do they go straight to the president?
There's no time in which the president is presented an option by one of us at the exemption of everybody else. It depends on the portfolio. But in every one of these portfolios, we have a team approach to this, which is the way the system is supposed to work. It's not the way it's always worked. You have had in the past tensions between the National Security Council that became operational in the Department of State. In this particular case, there's not much conflict between the two because it's the same person. And we basically, what we basically try to do in every one of these unique missions is we create a consensus team around it, and then we present the president options together. It's the president's decision, nobody else's. There's no overruling here. The president makes the decision. Our job is to present him options.
Shouldn't they report to you? Shouldn't there be a line of command and a line of transparency?
They report to me every day.
Where does the buck stop?
But they report to me every day in terms of keeping me apprised of what's happening. I give advice. I give, in some cases, direction. They involved heavily. For example, the special envoys rely almost exclusively on State Department personnel to assist them in all of their efforts. For example, on the Board of Peace, we help them position.
This is stuff that I use. This is stuff that I used to do when I worked in like retail fashion and blah blah blah. You know, like we're opening multiple stores in multiple locations. What's going on here? What do you got? What's the problems? Is there anything that you need me to do? Blah blah blah. You're good. You're good. Okay, what's next? You got it. Like, we put people in positions that we trust, and then we all have conversations together. What's so hard to understand about this?
The entire gathering last week,
it's business
and all the work
101.
that's going to happen now. On every one of these issues, it's not linear. No single individual other than the president has the ability to dictate our foreign policy. Our job is to come to a consensus view on the best way forward. Where there are disputes, those are presented to the president, and he makes the decision.
Let's talk about the Board of Peace then, because all treaties and statutes have to be approved by Congress, and the president is starting a new board of peace and would be,
Oh, do you feel
we
left
would need
out?
that authority. The authority for the filing stems from the International
we're
Organizations
against the
Immunities
Board of
Act.
Peace.
But it's my understanding it only provides the president with
All
such
right, fine.
authority when
Fine.
participation by the
Fuck the Board of
in an
Peace.
organization has been approved by treaty or statute.
I hate that thing.
Treaties and statutes must be approved by Congress. So when
We're
will the
going back to war,
administration be
everybody.
requesting Congress pass legislation to authorize the president to extend this benefits to the Board of Peace, creating the Board of Peace, and when will it be sent?
Well, actually, the Board of Peace was chartered and set up by the UN Security Council through a vote of the UN Security Council as to deliberation. So it's an international organism recognized by the Security Council of the United Nations, which is something I think many of you should be supportive of, the fact that we're doing it.
The president is claiming his authority is from the International Organizations Immunities Act, and this law only provides the president authority when U.S. participation has been approved by treaty or statute. I know my time is up. Please consider working with us to do these things. You know what it is to be a senator. You know what that collaboration and cooperation mean. And I
Did
think
you
that all of
complete
us
any sentence there at the end?
expect that respect from you and would really appreciate it.
Oh my God, if she's not reading off of a page, she can't even finish. These people are crazy. Woke says, is she okay? I think she just had a stroke.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Secretary, you've been very generous with your time. We have just a few comments to wind up here. Senator Shaheen.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. I hope
almost
that
done.
you will come more often before this committee. But I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. One is that under the CASE Act, the State Department is required, as are other agencies,
get
to
this
give
focus right, Sam?
documents
Come on.
like the one that Senator Schatz was raising for the agreement between Venezuela and the U.S. to this committee. We have not yet received it, so I hope that we will see it in the near future.
It's on Pam Bondi's desk.
The other thing, with respect to the exchange between you and Senator Rosen, I can tell you that we have, as the minority staff, requested on multiple occasions updates from the State Department on the special envoy's negotiations on the...
Zep says we're being tortured. Zep, you're not the one that's got to watch it every single day. I mean, oh my God. Like we definitely steal a lot from Mystery Science Theater 3000, but sometimes I do feel like I am trapped. I sometimes feel like I am trapped in this freaking revolving reality where all I do is watch politics all the freaking time. And, you know, it's fun and I enjoy it. But I mean, when you're in the bubble, I think that being as in the bubble as we can, we're able to make fun of things that other people can't.
Ukraine war with Russia, and we have been denied access to any of that information. I would
just
hope
wait till we can do live
number one
during the
that
day
would be available
for like
because I
7
think
hours during the day.
Everybody's interested in trying to support efforts to end this war in Ukraine. This should not be an adversarial
let's just stop it.
position. And number two, I would also hope that, like Senator Curtis, that you would be willing to have someone from state come before the committee. We have not had a hearing on negotiations over the war in Ukraine since I've been on this committee.
Why do you need to be a part of it? Why does anyone need to be a part of this?
And so I hope you will make that commitment to come have state come and be part of a hearing on the war in Ukraine and the negotiations there.
About what?
And we would love to do that, and I'll make sure that happens. And I will tell you, I can give you a brief update. I know it's late, but I don't mind. I mean, we can continue to talk about this a little bit because it's important.
Well, I mean,
it's a very fluid situation, unfortunately. I mean, as you know, it's moving very quickly. My sense of it is that for the most part, I discussed the security guarantees piece, which was part of a meeting and efforts that took place in the early part of this year. I think the one remaining item remains the one you're all familiar with, and that is territorial claim on Donetsk in particular. And I know there's active work going to try to see if both sides' views on that can't be reconciled. It's still a bridge we haven't crossed. It's still a gap, but at least we've been able to narrow down the issue set to one central one. And it will probably be a very difficult one. but nonetheless, it's one that work is going on. There was a meeting late last week in the UAE, which I think for the first time in many years was trilateral, involved the U.S. presence. Jared was there and Steve Witkoff were there, along with representatives of Russia and Ukraine. They were going to follow up talks again this week in that regard, bilateral. There might be a U.S. presence, but it won't be Steve and Jared. And we continue to try to move that forward. I want to speak in frankness with you. Some of this stuff that's being talked about.
You know what, by the way, I want to stream one more thing that we didn't stream yesterday. Is UFO Johnny still inside the chat?
It's easier for the parties engaged to find flexibility on some of these matters if they're not being deliberated in the public on a constant basis, because it creates political pressures internally on both sides. As you can imagine in Ukraine, you know, the notion that you would even consider a change in land and after all that's gone in the war is not, it's difficult. And in the case of Russia, they've been telling their people.
UFO Johnny, John Deere tour coming up next.
For 2.5 years that they're winning this war overwhelmingly.
I mean,
so people are going to wonder, why are we giving up land if we're winning so strongly? So there's some dynamics there at play that are important. But I think if you need more information on that, we'll provide it. Just know that this has been so fluid that an update like the one I just gave you could be outdated in 72 hours if some new development occurs. But your point is taken, and we'll be responsive to that.
I appreciate that. I think the other point of a hearing is it gives people a chance to
let's go, pretty
questions
scarf.
that we're hearing, as you know, from our constituents, from other people, and try and get answers. And I appreciate that it's a changing dynamic and that that's always going to be the case, and that there are issues
Ukraine?
on both in
Are we still
Ukraine
talking about
and in Russia
Ukraine?
with respect to what comes out in public. But given the amount of money that
UFO Johnny, promises made, promises kept.
the United States has put into supporting this effort, given the support
My
among
honor.
the American people and given the support in Congress, it seems to me that
Great comment.
we owe people the ability to
Okay,
have
we're
a
done.
public
Let's
hearing
get out
and
of here.
to ask questions.
We're done. Come on.
Thank you.
I'm
I
done.
appreciate that.
I'm done.
Secretary
We got like
Rubio,
4 more minutes.
Don't answer this question if you don't feel it's appropriate, but did I understand you to say that the portion of the discussions regarding settlement in Ukraine, regarding security for Ukraine, are essentially agreed to by both
A
sides?
hair juicer says, I'm welding at John Deere right now. Well, I mean, you should probably get back to work, hair juicer.
Because that's news to me, and it's a
Stop
big news
watching the
item
stream.
if that's a fact.
Well, I think you could argue they're agreed to from
How can you even
our
see
side
me
of
in
the
that
equation.
helmet?
There's obviously a Russian dynamic at play here. And of course, any security guarantees would come into play after the conflict were to end. Of
course.
And so there's that component to it. But the broader point I was making is that in all these discussions about security guarantees that people are putting out there, it's pretty clear that the only security guarantee that people keep pushing forward is one that involves a deployment of some European troops on the ground, but with a very strong U.S. backstop. My point being, it was in the broader context of the NATO alliance, and that is, we have to understand that even something like that, in Europe, they don't have the capabilities of doing a real security guarantee without a U.S. backstop, which tells you the capability gap that needs to be closed.
America
and it's one of the
is
reasons
no
why the president
backstop.
keeps pointing to
America is no backstop. If anything, we're home plate. Oh my God! What a great political analysis from Mr. Rotella right there. America is no backstop. If anything, we are home plate.
NATO and its need for our partners to get stronger. And it is true, they've committed to 5% spending. That's obviously going to take some time. But that's really the broader point I was trying to make in that regard. But every notion of security guarantee that's been talked about and that the Europeans have pushed is one that requires a strong commitment by the United States as a backstop, which, in essence means we would be committed, potentially, in a conflict, in a future conflict. And that's something that I think needs to be understood in the context of what I've just described as the problems with NATO capabilities.
Very clear. Thank you very much. Thank you again for your time.
Just hit the fucking
I'm going to
gavel.
leave the record open until close of business tomorrow. If there
We're
are
here for the
questions,
gavel.
appreciate it if you assist in getting answers to those questions. Great job. Thank you for spending the time with us. We sincerely appreciate it. The
Thanks,
American
guy I
people are
never
lucky to
heard
have
of.
you as the Secretary of State. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.
Boom! Gavel to gavel. That's what we do. Gavel to gavel, baby. Okay. Just because Mr. Rotella's having fun, and it's the end of the month, and I have no idea what watch hours we're at right now because Rumble stopped accumulating those for some reason. It's okay. Rumble's a growing platform, everybody. We love Rumble. It's the only website that we can stream on. We love Rumble. We're gonna watch why are we watching this? Because we watched everyone's favorite president, without exceptions, maybe, giving a speech in Iowa yesterday, and he was talking about John Deere. The John Deere CEO was there, so we're going to do a walking tour of the John Deere facility. Why not? We'll be right back after this. Welcome to the Dome.